What if everything you've ever believed about who you are and how reality works has been upside down? What if the unease you feel, the loss of interest in old patterns, and the strange sense of detachment aren't signs of decline, but of emergence? Beneath the noise of ordinary life, something ancient and powerful is stirring. You are not breaking down. You are breaking through. This is the awakening of your quantum consciousness. If you find yourself feeling detached from old interests, you're not losing your mind. You're waking up. The things that once fueled you now seem empty. Conversations that used to spark energy leave you drained. Drama no longer hooks you. Achievements feel hollow. The need to be understood doesn't weigh on you like before. This isn't depression, and it isn't indifference. It's something deeper, something stirring within. You're beginning to step into the role of witness, rather than the main character. Though that shift may seem unsettling, it signals the emergence of a new level of awareness. This awareness often arrives quietly, almost imperceptibly. You might move through an ordinary day and suddenly feel as though you are both inside the experience and watching it unfold at a distance. Thoughts echo in your mind, but they no longer sound absolute. Instead, they reveal themselves as scripts written long ago. Emotions still rise, but they no longer drag you away. Instead, you notice them drifting through like clouds. For the first time, you see that the identity you've carried, name, story, and history, are layers of clothing you've simply grown used to wearing. With that realization comes a pull, subtle yet undeniable, to set those garments down. This isn't denial or avoidance of reality. It's a vibrational shift, a natural recalibration of consciousness. When it outgrows the rigid patterns of conditioning, your awareness begins to lift from the mask of identity, and in that lifting, something ancient begins to stir. What you once believed to be yourself starts unraveling, and what emerges is not foreign. It feels strangely familiar, like remembering something you've always known. You're no longer the same person, and the reason is profound. What mystics have described as awakening, and what certain physicists have called a shift in consciousness, is unfolding. Recognition dawns that you are not a body containing consciousness. Rather, consciousness contains the body. And with that recognition, reality begins to loosen its rigid boundaries. Certainties unravel, assumptions are questioned. And suddenly you find yourself walking between two worlds. The one you were taught was real, and the one you are only beginning to sense. This new world doesn't seem built from matter, but from mind itself. You notice strange alignments, coincidences that feel too precise. Moments when thoughts seem to ripple outward and shape events, stretches of time that bend and shift. These experiences aren't random. They're signals that your field of awareness is expanding, tuning into subtler layers of reality. Yet, from the outside, little may appear different. Your job remains, your routines continue, the faces around you are the same. And still, within you, everything has changed. This mismatch can cause doubt. The outer world reflects your old vibration, while inside you feel the birth of something new. It's a threshold space, a void where your previous self dissolves, but your new consciousness hasn't fully anchored. In this space, it's tempting to retreat, to deny what you've seen, to slip back into the comfort of illusions. But once the veil lifts, it cannot be lowered again. What you've glimpsed cannot be unknown. The mind may struggle, but the deeper self has already stepped through. And so begins the emergence of quantum consciousness, not through teachings or books, but through direct experience. It unfolds in the undoing of everything you believed yourself to be. It arises in the discomfort of uncertainty and the peace of not needing certainty. Realization dawns that the mind was never designed merely to survive reality, but to actively shape it. This knowing shifts the very foundation of how you exist, revealing that your awareness is not a product of the world, but the origin of it. Since childhood, you were taught the opposite, that the solid external world creates your inner experience, that consciousness is a byproduct of matter, that thought arises from the brain like smoke from fire. But what if that model was never true? Traditional science traces the universe to particles and energy from which awareness mysteriously appears. Yet this model collapses when faced with the mystery of observation, imagination, or choice. The reality you've been handed can no longer explain the reality you're beginning to live. Quantum science cracks the illusion wide open. At the smallest scale, nothing exists as fixed matter until it is observed. Particles live as possibilities, as waves of potential, until awareness interacts with them and collapses them into form. This isn't philosophy, it's physics, and it unravels the materialist view at its core. Thinkers like Amit Goswami go further, declaring that consciousness is not shaped by reality, that reality itself emerges from consciousness. Awareness isn't a byproduct, it is the source. This means your body, your brain, your history, even your timeline, are not containers of consciousness. They exist within it. You are not a thing moving through a world of other things. You are the field that contains both seer and seen, dreamer and dream. When this shift anchors, the rules of cause and effect soften. Time feels less linear, synchronicities increase. Life reveals itself as flowing through you rather than happening to you. Decisions stop being calculations and instead resonate as harmonics, guided by alignment. In this space, you no longer think in the old way. You sense. You feel into paths, and in doing so, you intentionally collapse one timeline over another. You become the observer who chooses, shaping possibility into reality. But paradox emerges here. Mind cannot fully understand this process. Quantum consciousness is not an idea to be grasped, but a state to be lived. It is not a concept to analyze, but a frequency to embody. Awakening, then, is not retreat from life, but deeper entry into it. World may look unchanged, yet your experience of it is transformed. Old dramas no longer capture you. Fear-driven conversations lose their grip on your nervous system. You step out of the collective script, not as rebellion, but as remembrance. You realize you are not a result of creation. You are creation becoming aware of itself. And this awareness is not rare, not reserved for mystics, is natural, waiting beneath the noise of distraction. As this shift deepens, the scaffolding of your old identity begins to fall away. It's not collapse from weakness, but release of what no longer serves. The roles, beliefs, and labels that once felt solid reveal themselves as fragile and false. What you thought was essential turns hollow. This unraveling can feel like grief, not because you are dying, but because the illusion is. The self you constructed for survival is dissolving, making room for the presence of the self that always was. The ego resists this change. It whispers fear, tells you you're losing control, convinces you something is wrong. But nothing is wrong. The ego is not evil. It is outdated, built from culture, family, and trauma to help you navigate a limited map. Yet, as your awareness expands, the map no longer matches the terrain. You begin to see, through conditioning and question, not only your thoughts but the very thinker of those thoughts. This is the sacred dismantling of the programmed self. In this dismantling, space opens. You start witnessing emotions without being consumed by them, thoughts without being ruled by them. You no longer mistake the voice in your head for who you are. Instead, you recognize yourself as the awareness behind the voice. Mystics across centuries have spoken of this realization, and now it is echoed by modern thinkers who remind us that consciousness is primary. You are not a bundle of memories or flesh. You are awareness expressing itself in this moment through a body, but never confined by it. As the old self loses power, not through battle but through disinterest, a new self rises. One untethered from narratives, unafraid of the unknown, not defined by outcomes. This self is presence itself, and from this place, life bends differently. You no longer strive to control. You attune. You no longer chase. You align. Reality becomes responsive not to your effort, but to your frequency. The field reflects not what you desire, what you are. And in remembering this, you step fully into the role of conscious creator. If life feels like it's unraveling, know this is not a breakdown but a breakthrough. The old programs are dissolving, illusions fading, and what remains is your essence, the creator awakening within its own creation. There comes a moment in every awakening when you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What am I creating now?" Until then, life may have felt like something to survive, to endure, or to manage. But awakening reveals it has always been something to generate, to shape, to direct through presence. Observation is the first step, but not the final one. Watching your thoughts and emotions opens the doorway, yet eventually you must sit in the seat of the creator. Not with control or force, but with coherent awareness. In the quantum field, observation is never neutral. It collapses probability into form. The energy behind your observation determines what becomes real. Fear collapses into chaos, clarity into peace. Each belief, each choice, each story acts as a signal to the field. And the field responds not to words but to vibration. This is the pivot point where you move from reacting to generating. Reality stops being something that happens to you and becomes something that unfolds through you. The shift isn't instant, nor is it about perfect control. It is about consistent alignment. Your frequency ceases to be a byproduct of circumstance and becomes your true contribution. You stop merely reading the field and begin writing within it. And when you write, life responds in kind, weaving synchronicities that confirm the new resonance you've chosen. Those synchronicities are not coincidences, but signs of coherence. A thought manifests more quickly. An unexpected call arrives at just the right time. An idea seems to come from nowhere. Even time bends, stretching or collapsing in ways that remind you reality is not fixed but fluid. Life moves with you, instead of against you, because you've stopped resisting it. You no longer try to bend the world to your preference, but allow it to reveal the version that already resonates with who you are becoming. This is the essence of the quantum shift, realizing the world is not a pursuit, but a reflection. You don't attract what you want, you align with what you are. The field mirrors coherence, not desire. The question becomes, who are you being right now? Not who you were yesterday, not who you plan to be tomorrow, but who you embody in this moment, because you cannot summon a new timeline from an old vibration. Abundance does not arise from lack, clarity not from confusion, love not from fear. The field is impartial, responding only to frequency. And so the work is not to push harder, but to realign deeper, to embody the state of the reality you choose without waiting for external proof. When you do, the shift begins, silently, undeniably, realize that the observer and the creator have always been the same. That awareness is not passive. It is the active force of creation itself. With this realization, life reorganizes around your state of being. Living from this place is not about perfection. It is about coherence. Every moment offers a choice of alignment, to collapse into fear or expand into trust, to resist what arises or to meet it with presence. The more often you choose coherence, the stronger the signal you emit, the more responsive the field becomes. What once felt like chaos reveals itself as rhythm, and you find yourself moving with currents rather than against them. To live this way is to move beyond survival into authorship. You stop bracing for life and begin shaping it. You no longer treat your frequency as incidental, but as the very blueprint of your reality. And in doing so, you step into the truth long hidden. You were never here just to witness. You are here to generate, to embody, to bring the unseen into form. Integration is where awakening becomes embodiment. It's one thing to feel aligned in meditation or in moments of clarity, another to hold that awareness in the middle of life's noise. True embodiment arrives when your center remains steady, not just in peace, but in the chaos of daily existence. When insights no longer come and go, but anchor as your natural state of being. This anchoring reveals itself in subtle ways. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and your body no longer surges with anger. An old wound is pressed, and you observe without collapsing. You don't suppress emotion, you simply refuse to be governed by it. You respond not from the self built to survive, but from the self that remembers. Awareness becomes your first nature, not an afterthought. Your relationships shift as well. Conversations deepen, not because you try harder, but because you no longer speak to defend or impress. You listen through presence rather than through need. Bonds evolve as you stop expecting others to complete what is already whole within you. Even your work transforms, once driven by obligation or proving, now flowing with clarity because it arises from alignment rather than force. From the outside, it may seem you are the same person doing the same things. But inside, the source of action has changed. Your choices no longer stem from external reference, but from inner resonance. You don't ask, is this right or wrong? But instead, is this the frequency I choose to amplify? You trust the pull of intuition more than the logic of fear, and in doing so, you collapse timelines not through effort, but through coherence. Living as your quantum self doesn't mean floating above reality, but moving through it with grounded sovereignty. You don't bypass pain, you witness it from a deeper center. You don't seek control, you trust calibration. Challenges still arise, resistance still appears, but your relationship with them is transformed. Each obstacle is recognized as feedback, each difficulty as reflection of your current vibration. This awareness brings radical responsibility. You stop blaming the mirror for what it shows and instead adjust the source of the reflection. The field is not punishing or rewarding. It is echoing your state, and so you learn to see life not as random, but as responsive. Every moment is feedback, every circumstance an invitation to refine your signal. This doesn't mean you control every external detail. It means you own your frequency in the face of what appears. That steadiness becomes your true power. From it, you realize that your choices are less about events and more about alignment. Each decision is a collapse of potential into form. Each observation a brushstroke on the canvas of reality. Life ceases to be a string of accidents and becomes a series of deliberate creations. Quantum consciousness is not a destination to reach, but a state to stabilize. Awakening is the beginning. Embodiment is the journey. Every return to alignment strengthens your foundation. Every moment of presence anchors the frequency deeper. You stop searching for extraordinary experiences and start recognizing the extraordinary in the ordinary. The field responding to the vibration you carry. This path is fragile in its early stages. Awakening cracks the shell, but stabilization requires constant return. Without anchoring, pull of the old frequency can quietly reassert itself. Environments, relationships, and habits still echo the self you once were. Without presence, you can slip back into those rhythms. This is why the time between awakening and embodiment feels so sacred and so delicate. In this between, your nervous system learns a new baseline. No longer waiting for external safety to feel calm, it becomes the source of safety itself. You discover regulation not as reaction, but as presence. This inner stability grows, not by never faltering, by returning again and again. Each return strengthens the signal, reminding you that embodiment is not perfection, but persistence. This persistence is not fueled by guilt or fear, but by love, by the deeper knowing that you no longer want to escape life, but to experience it fully. Awakening ceases to be about leaving behind the world and instead becomes about entering it with clarity, with coherence, with the fullness of your presence. You become less interested in transcendence and more devoted to integration. Real shift is not found in escaping reality, but in transforming your relationship with it. You learn that presence is not something you visit in meditation, but the very ground you live from. Awareness stops being a practice you recall and becomes the axis around which everything turns. In this, embodiment matures. Your quantum consciousness no longer a glimpse, but your natural operating state. To embody awareness is to allow the old scaffolding to dissolve completely. The identity once built from survival cannot exist at the same frequency as the quantum self. One is rigid, mechanical, reactive. The other fluid, expansive, attuned. To step into one, the other must fall away. This falling can feel like disorientation. It is necessary for the expansion to root. The ego resists, as always. It clings to familiar narratives, whispering of danger, convincing you that something is wrong. But as you observe it rather than obey it, its grip loosens. You see it for what it is, mask designed for survival in a world of programming. Not evil, simply outdated. It loses power not by battle, but by being seen. With each veil that lifts, you begin to witness thought patterns as foreign, beliefs as borrowed, reactions as echoes of conditioning. It's like walking through a house you thought was yours only to discover none of the furniture belongs to you. Awakening often feels like grief, not because you are dying, but because the false is. In its absence, space opens. In that space, the deeper self begins to rise. This self is not searching for identity or narrative. It is not afraid of uncertainty. It does not demand outcomes. It is presence, pure and simple. As it takes its place, the field responds. Reality bends differently, not because you forced it, but because you've tuned yourself to coherence. The self that was once hidden beneath layers of programming now becomes the axis of creation. Living from this space, you realize your nervous system no longer reacts in old ways. Arguments lose their pull. The chase for approval feels hollow. The compulsion for control fades. Peace outweighs the need to be right. Subtly but surely, your center stabilizes. Life still moves. It no longer moves you off your axis. From here, the field begins to reflect your new coherence. Choices emerge not as logical puzzles, but as intuitive resonance. You sense into possibilities rather than analyzing outcomes. You navigate timelines not by force, but by listening. And the reality that unfolds is less about effort and more about attunement. Challenges still arise, but you meet them differently. Rather than resisting, you witness. Rather than collapsing, you